I made a comment before. I said that obviously the ceiling is who he is, or who he has been for his career, but the floor was Karl Malone.
Come on now, dawg. Come on, man.
Rich Paul just compared LeBron James to Karl Malone and claimed Jordan's shoe success came from the crack epidemic. Yes, you read that correctly. LeBron's agent went on a podcast with Max Kellerman and said things so absurd that even Max had to pump the brakes. The mental gymnastics required to protect one man's legacy have reached levels that shouldn't be humanly possible. This needs to be documented. What's the most ridiculous thing Rich Paul said in this interview? The Malone comparison? The crack epidemic theory? Or claiming 26-year-old LeBron had nobody to help him?
You're actually pretty good if those guys can make shots.
So why wouldn't, I mean, I totally agree. If LeBron is Karl Malone, he can play several more years. Why not?
Well, listen, I know
and it's less for him to do, and so because of that, he can also play a little more defense.
Everyone's like, do the farewell and it's last year, this and that. Like, I don't know what it is, but I hope it's not his last year.
Let's start with the Karl Malone comparison, because it's where Rich Paul completely lost the plot. He said that LeBron's floor, his absolute baseline if he just decided to be a role player, would be Karl Malone, just setting screens and popping for shots. That's how Rich Paul described one of the greatest power forwards in NBA history. Like Karl Malone was just some big body who set picks and occasionally caught a pass for an open jumper.
Like if LeBron just decided to set screens, pop, if you set like last night, right?
Pick and pop, pick and roll.
But remember I said they're gonna have to, if DeAndre Ayton sets a screen, they're gonna blitz Luka and make DeAndre Ayton make a decision.
Right.
If LeBron sets a screen, you pretty much have to switch it.
You're on one of the greatest decision makers who ever lived.
Because if you blitz him, now he's short rolling as a decision maker, and so
impossible.
So now.
And by the way, now if Austin Reeves is healthy, I always think they should move Austin Reeves. But when you put it like that, if Luka and LeBron are in the pick and roll, and Austin Reeves is on the floor, you're going to score.
Max Kellerman had to immediately step in and redirect the conversation because even he couldn't let that slide. And Max is pretty friendly to LeBron narratives most of the time. But calling Karl Malone just a pick and pop guy? That's erasure of an entire Hall of Fame career. Malone operated in the post like it was his personal office. His footwork, his touch around the rim, his ability to punish smaller defenders, all of that gets ignored when you reduce him to a screen setter.
The fact that you're talking about this on Game Over now.
I hope it's not his last year.
I don't talk to him about it. You have not discussed this with LeBron?
No.
You never went to LeBron and said, why don't you be Karl Malone?
Oh, yes. No.
And what's he say to that?
Not be Karl Malone. No, what you mean? I just told you that the other night. That's what we were talking about. I liked him.
No, but that's for this game. And then he made comments.
That was for the Memphis game.
By the way, okay, all right. This opens up a whole can of worms.
Malone's mid-range game was lethal. Some of the best field goal percentages from that distance in NBA history. He could face you up, jab step, pump fake, and hit shots that looked impossible. LeBron in year 23 still doesn't have a consistent mid-range game. He settles for threes or drives to the rim. There's no in-between game that compares to what Malone did for 2 decades. And the rebounding? Malone is top 10 all-time in rebounds. LeBron plays power forward and center, supposedly, but his rebounding numbers don't match someone who's actually battling in the paint every night. Malone grabbed boards against everyone. He was relentless on the glass. That wasn't just a pick-and-pop player. That was a complete power forward who dominated every aspect of the position except winning a championship, which somehow became the only thing people remember about him.
Now, here's the thing, and again, Rich is partially joking, but it sounds so disrespectful. To the guy that is the 3rd leading scorer ever, to the guy that is the 7th leading rebounder ever, you know what sounds better? If LeBron had not had otherworldly athleticism, he would have still been Karl.
Yeah, but sometimes the truth hurts, you know?
I don't know that it's the truth. Because
okay.
LeBron's not the rebounder.
That's the only
Malone's been. LeBron is like you said, not the rebounder, doesn't like playing inside as much. Now, I wish he did.
And maybe he would if it wasn't the athlete. Here's the thing.
He should, because it could take his game to a whole nother level. I'll give you this. Finish this up.
Sure.
At 41, 42, he could be the late level Karl Malone.
Rich Paul tried to make it sound like LeBron could just casually replicate Malone's career if he wanted to play a supporting role. That's insulting to Malone, and it's dishonest about what made him great. But this is what happens when you're so committed to elevating one player that you have to diminish everyone else's accomplishments to make the comparison work. Then we get to the part where Rich Paul claims that 26-year-old LeBron had nobody in the locker room to teach him how to win. That's the setup for why LeBron's presence with Luka Doncic is supposedly so valuable. The argument goes like this. Luka is talented but hasn't won a championship yet, and having LeBron around will teach him what it takes to win because LeBron never had that guidance when he was young.
Well, I think it's interesting because as I've watched LeBron throughout his career, and obviously marveled at the great things he could do, I've often said to myself and to others, imagine Karl Malone doing the things LeBron does. Because they're the same size. They are listed, both of them, at 6'9", 250. So imagine Karl Malone running the point, leading the league in assists, shooting threes, guarding the opponent's point guard. Like all of that stuff, that's what we're watching with LeBron James.
Let's pause and remember what actually happened when LeBron was 26. He was 25 when he joined the Miami Heat. He left Cleveland to team up with Dwayne Wade, who already had a championship and Finals MVP. He joined Chris Bosh, another All-Star in his prime. He played under Pat Riley's front office and Eric Spoelstra's coaching. That entire organization was built around championship experience and winning culture.
Because I can tell you something. When LeBron was 26 years old, there was no LeBron next to him in the locker room.
LeBron didn't figure out how to win on his own. He went to Miami specifically because they had the infrastructure and talent he needed to win championships. He spent 4 years there, won 2 titles, and learned everything about how championship teams operate. Then he took that knowledge back to Cleveland and later to Los Angeles. The idea that he did it alone is a complete rewrite of history. Rich Paul wants to act like LeBron was some lone warrior who cracked the code through pure will and intelligence. The reality is he made smart decisions about where to play and who to play with. That's fine. Lots of great players do that. But pretending he didn't have help or guidance when he literally orchestrated joining 2 other superstars is absurd.
I'm not even making this about LeBron. Put LeBron off to the side. You know why? LeBron has his championships. He has his accolades. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He has all these things. Luka doesn't.
No, he does not.
He has the talent, but he hasn't won a championship yet. Right?
And if this continues, he never will.
And
this has to change.
But there also hasn't been talk of, let's help you understand what it's like or how to win a championship.
Oh, you mean the influence that LeBron can have on Luka?
Of course.
Yes.
That is the money.
Now you're talking.
That is the money.
Yep.
That is what everything should be about. How are we putting people around this young man in the locker room? Attitudes, work ethics, professionalism, play, IQ, all these things. Because I can tell you something. When LeBron was 26 years old, there was no LeBron next to him in the locker room.
The Luka angle makes this even worse. Rich Paul is essentially arguing that the Lakers should build around a 41-year-old LeBron because he can teach Luka things that will help the franchise long term. He's telling the Lakers to sacrifice future assets and flexibility to support someone who's in the final stages of his career. And he's framing it as doing Luka a favor. Max Kellerman tried to dress it up by saying you don't want to waste LeBron's year because of the intangible value he brings. But the underlying message is clear. Trade everything. Mortgage the future. Build around the 41-year-old because his presence justifies it. That's not basketball strategy. That's agent speak trying to maximize his client's situation regardless of what makes sense for the organization.
Now, again, I know it could probably be taken out of context, but I'm just saying, don't take no years for granted. Don't pigeonhole the future. But if we're talking about a strength in numbers type of thing, and we're talking about strictly the focus on Luka, not nobody else.
So to understand what you're saying, let me make sure I understand this. You don't throw a year away.
No.
Even if you think that you're not going to win a championship with this crew, even if AR is there or if he's not there, whatever, the value at this moment is that LeBron can impart to Luka the part of the journey that he has been on that Luka has not been on.
Yes.
And that has real value, not only in terms of the kind of run you can make this year, whatever that may be, but
Also
going forward for the franchise. It's a great point. Let me ask you a question.
Rich Paul said when LeBron was 26, there was nobody like LeBron in the locker room to guide him. That's technically true. There was Dwayne Wade, who had already won a championship as the best player on his team. There was Chris Bosh, a proven all-star. There was Pat Riley, who built multiple championship dynasties. There was Eric Spoelstra, who would become one of the best coaches of his generation. LeBron had an entire support system designed to help him win. Acting like he was alone is rewriting history in the most obvious way possible. Now we get to the crown jewel of ridiculous statements. Rich Paul explaining why Michael Jordan's shoes were so successful. He brought out a whiteboard, he prepared a presentation, and one of his key points was that the crack epidemic helped drive Air Jordan sales. Yes, the crack epidemic. He actually said that. His argument went like this. The crack epidemic created a revenue stream among consumers who wouldn't normally have that kind of disposable income. Drug dealers had money to spend, and they spent it on Jordans. Therefore, the crack epidemic contributed to the shoe's success by concentrating wealth in people who could afford expensive sneakers. Max Kellerman's face during this explanation said everything. Even he couldn't figure out how to spin this into something reasonable. Rich Paul kept going, talking about how crack was more accessible and cheaper than heroin, which changed the drug trade dynamics and somehow made Jordans more popular. The logic was so twisted it barely qualified as an argument. Let's be clear about what actually happened. Michael Jordan turned basketball shoes into lifestyle products. He was doing things on the court that nobody had seen before. The shoes became associated with his greatness, his style, his cultural impact. People wanted Jordans because Jordan was Michael Jordan, not because drug dealers had extra cash. Kids weren't begging their parents for Jordans because of the crack epidemic. They wanted them because Jordan made them cool. He made them aspirational. He created the idea that these shoes could make you better, could make you fly, could give you confidence. That's marketing genius combined with athletic brilliance. It had nothing to do with how drugs were distributed in communities. Rich Paul trying to credit the crack epidemic for Jordan's success is offensive on multiple levels. It diminishes Jordan's actual impact. It reduces a cultural phenomenon to drug money. It ignores how Jordan's talent and charisma created a brand that transcended basketball. And it shows how desperate the LeBron camp is to find any explanation for why Jordan achieved things LeBron hasn't. Nobody ever got excited about LeBron's shoes the way people got excited about Jordan's. Kids don't come home begging for the new LeBrons. You can't name a specific LeBron shoe from a milestone game. The shoes don't have cultural cachet beyond being what LeBron happens to wear. That's not because of drug economics. That's because Jordan created something unique that nobody has replicated. The crack epidemic destroyed communities. It tore apart families. People died. People lost everything. And Rich Paul wants to use that tragedy to explain why Jordan's shoes sold well. That's not just wrong, it's disgraceful. It shows a complete lack of perspective about what actually matters and what made Jordan special. Jordan's influence went way beyond shoes. He changed how athletes were marketed. He proved that individual players could become global brands. He showed that excellence on the court could translate into business success off it. His shoes were part of that, but they succeeded because of him, not because of external economic factors involving illegal drugs. This is what happens when you're so committed to propping up one player that you'll say anything to diminish everyone else. Rich Paul has made a career out of managing LeBron's image and business interests. But when you start blaming the crack epidemic for Michael Jordan's success, you've crossed into territory that's beyond spin. That's just making things up and hoping nobody calls you on it. The Justice League comparison is accurate. There's clearly a coordinated effort among LeBron's camp to control narratives and shape how he's perceived historically. They push the GOAT conversation constantly. They rewrite inconvenient facts. They diminish other players' accomplishments to make LeBron look better by comparison. It's not subtle, and it's not working on anyone who actually pays attention. Rich Paul's entire appearance on this podcast was an exercise in narrative management. Every point he made was designed to elevate LeBron while explaining away or minimizing challenges to that narrative. The Karl Malone comparison tried to suggest LeBron's baseline is Hall of Fame level. The Luka discussion tried to justify building around a 41-year-old. The Jordan shoe explanation tried to credit external factors instead of Jordan's actual greatness. None of it holds up under basic scrutiny. Malone was way more than a pick-and-pop player. LeBron had plenty of help and guidance in Miami. Jordan's shoes succeeded because Jordan was Jordan. These aren't complicated facts. But when you're committed to a specific narrative, facts become obstacles to work around rather than foundations to build on. The frustrating part is that LeBron's actual career is impressive enough without all this nonsense. He's one of the greatest players ever. His longevity is unprecedented. His ability to impact games in multiple ways sets him apart from most players in history. Those accomplishments stand on their own. They don't need Rich Paul going on podcasts saying absurd things to make them seem more impressive. But the GOAT conversation has become so consuming that even legitimate achievements aren't enough. There has to be a case that LeBron is definitively better than Jordan. And since the straightforward comparison doesn't support that conclusion, people in LeBron's camp resort to increasingly desperate arguments. That's how you end up with an agent blaming the crack epidemic for Jordan's shoe sales. Max Kellerman's role in these conversations is to occasionally pump the brakes when things get too ridiculous. He'll redirect or reframe so that whatever Rich Paul said doesn't sound quite as absurd. But even Max has limits. You could see him struggling to make sense of the crack epidemic theory. Some things are just too far gone to salvage. The broader pattern here is what matters. This isn't just one podcast appearance where Rich Paul said some questionable things. This is part of an ongoing campaign to shape LeBron's legacy in ways that facts don't always support. It involves media members, current and former players, analysts, and business partners, all pushing similar talking points, regardless of whether they're accurate. That coordination is what makes it feel like a Justice League operation. There's clearly strategy involved. Certain narratives get pushed repeatedly until they become accepted as truth, even when they're not supported by evidence. The goal is to win through repetition and volume, rather than through actual compelling arguments. LeBron's camp knows that public perception shapes legacy. They know that how he's remembered will depend partly on controlling the narrative now. So they say things like, LeBron's floor is Karl Malone. They claim he had nobody to help him at 26. They credit crack epidemics for Jordan's success. And they hope that enough people either believe it or at least stop questioning it. That's where we are now. Rich Paul can make whatever claims he wants about LeBron's greatness or Jordan's circumstances, but nobody who's paying attention takes it at face value anymore. The pattern is too obvious. The agenda is too clear. And the willingness to say ridiculous things to support that agenda has undermined whatever credibility he might have had.